It started with something as subtle as scent. I'd gotten home from a business trip a day early, flight rescheduled, meetings wrapped ahead of time. Normally, I'd have texted Sarah to let her know, maybe surprise her with takeout from that Thai place she loved. But for some reason, I didn't. I wanted to see her face when I walked through the door, to catch a glimpse of her in real life after too many video calls and miss you texts. Something about that idea felt warm and grounding. But that feeling vanished the second I stepped into our bedroom. First, nothing screamed out of place. The bed was made, sort of. One side looked slept in, slightly wrinkled, like someone had laid there for a while and then quickly pulled the blanket back up to make it look undisturbed. The other side, the side I usually slept on, was different. Flattened pillow, crisp sheets, and then there was the smell. Cologne. Not just any cologne. Strong. Musky. Foreign. It didn't belong in this room, and it definitely didn't belong to me. I hadn't worn cologne in months, and when I did, it was something subtle. Clean. Not this. I stood there, suitcase still in hand, staring at the bed like it might rearrange itself into something more innocent. But it didn't. And then I saw it. A single hair on the pillow. Dark. Curled. Thick. Not Sarah's. Her hair was fine, light brown, usually tied back or braided. This wasn't hers. And it sure as hell wasn't mine. A hollow, uncomfortable silence pressed into my ears. The kind you only notice when everything else in your mind stops. I wasn't even thinking yet, just observing. Something felt fundamentally wrong in the space I was supposed to feel most at home. A minute later, I heard her footsteps in the hallway. "Gavin?" she called out, casual as ever. "You're back already?" Her tone had that practiced cheerfulness I used to find endearing. It didn't match the tension in my gut now. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Flight changed last minute. Thought I'd surprise you." She stepped into the room with a laundry basket in her arms and paused when she saw me. It was subtle, but I saw it, the flash of hesitation. Her eyes darted briefly to the bed, to the suitcase, to me. Then, just as quickly, she smiled. "Well, you definitely surprised me," she said, walking over to the hamper by the closet and setting the basket down. "I was going to wash the sheets tonight. They felt dusty." "Dusty?" I echoed. She nodded too quickly, like she was in a rush to get past that detail. "Yeah, just musty. I think I left the window open too long yesterday, and you know how this room gets." I nodded, more to myself than to her. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But the scent still hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. And I wasn't crazy. The hair was gone now. I didn't see her pick it up, but it wasn't on the pillow anymore. "Did you have a good trip?" she asked, walking over to the dresser and fidgeting with a stack of folded t-shirts that didn't need rearranging. "It was fine," I said, still staring at the bed. "Long. Good," she said, back still turned. "I missed you." I didn't respond right away. The words didn't land. They hovered in the air like something she thought she should say, not something she felt. I set my suitcase down slowly, deliberately, and walked to the window. It was shut tight. Later that evening, we sat down for dinner. Leftovers, chicken stir-fry and rice that she reheated with awkward small talk. I watched her as she spoke about her week, about work drama and a new intern who couldn't figure out the coffee machine. It was all so normal, so painfully normal, but I couldn't unsee the way her eyes didn't quite meet mine. How her smile didn't crinkle at the corners the way it used to. How her phone buzzed 3 times during dinner, screen down, untouched. She didn't offer any explanation. "So how's the software pitch coming?" she asked mid-bite, deflecting. I shrugged. "Same as it was when we talked Tuesday. Nothing new." She nodded, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. "That's good." We finished eating in near silence. Afterward, she washed the dishes while I stood in the doorway, watching her from behind. She wore that old college hoodie I always liked. Blue. A little frayed at the sleeves, but it didn't feel comforting anymore. Felt like a costume. "I'm gonna turn in early," she said, drying her hands. "You must be exhausted." "Yeah," I replied. "Long day." We got into bed like we had 100 times before. She turned away from me, facing the wall. I lay on my back, eyes fixed on the ceiling. And that's when it hit me. She didn't ask about the trip. Not really. Not once did she ask about my meetings, the clients, the flight, the things she used to care about. It was like she already knew the answers. My thoughts raced in tight circles. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that maybe she did just forget to change the sheets. That maybe someone had dropped by. That maybe, just maybe, there was an innocent reason for it all. But I couldn't shake the feeling in my gut. That still, quiet sense of something broken. Something cracked deep beneath the surface that no polite conversation could glue back together. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask the questions I wanted to ask. Instead, I stared at the ceiling until sleep eventually dragged me under. And even then, I dreamed of things I didn't want to see. Things I'd never be able to unsee. That night didn't explode into a fight. It didn't end with slammed doors or angry shouting. It ended in silence. The kind of silence that settles when something important dies and nobody wants to admit it. The morning after I came home, things moved as if nothing had happened. Sarah acted like everything was fine, almost too fine. She was humming while making coffee, flipping through her tablet, wearing my old sweatshirt like it meant something. I played along. I smiled. I asked about her day like I used to. But inside I was already elsewhere. It wasn't the cologne or the wrinkle in the bedsheets that gnawed at me most, it was the way she pivoted so fast into normal, like she'd rehearsed it. Like she'd been waiting for this moment and already knew the lines. That was when I realized this didn't start last night. I just missed all the signs. The rest of the day, I went through the motions, answered emails, checked in with my team, sat through a project update. But I was moving through fog. My thoughts weren't on work. They were backtracking, rewinding months, replaying conversations and moments I hadn't thought twice about before. Like the week she started coming home late. She said it was a big campaign launch, that her team was on fire and working overtime. I'd believed her, she'd always been ambitious. But the late nights kept coming. Even after the campaign had supposedly wrapped, she still had follow-up meetings and networking events. Then there was her phone. It used to live face up on the counter, buzzing and lighting up whenever messages came in. Lately though, it was always face down. Notifications silenced. One time I picked it up by accident when we were clearing the table and she practically dove across the room to snatch it back. I thought I was being paranoid then. Yeah? I know better. And I remembered the ring. Her wedding band had always been something she wore proudly. But a few months ago, she claimed the band was getting too tight and said she needed to have it resized. She stopped wearing it altogether after that. I offered to take it to the jeweler for her twice. She always said she'd already taken care of it. I never saw it again. One weekend, she said she had a conference out in Denver. I offered to drive her to the airport. She insisted on taking an Uber because she didn't want to trouble me. That struck me as odd. Then Sarah hated ride shares. She said they were uncomfortable and unpredictable. But I let it go. God, I let so many things go. There was the time she showed me tickets to a theater show she claimed were for her friend Clara and Clara's new boyfriend. She asked me if she could use our account to book them since hers was being weird. Clara later mentioned she hadn't been to a show in over a year. And then there was the dinner with my family last month. We were sitting around the table, my parents, my brother, and someone mentioned kids like they always do. I glanced at Sarah to see her reaction and she smiled and nodded like she always does. But I caught her reaching for her wine faster than usual. Her answers felt clipped, her laugh a little forced. After that dinner, I asked her if she still wanted to try. She said yes. But her eyes were tired, her voice distracted. Let's just wait until after this quarter wraps, she said. Work's been so intense. She used to say we could make anything work together. Now it was all about timing and stress and how she wasn't sure if now was the right time. It wasn't just her words. It was the distance. We stopped touching without realizing it. No hand brushes in the hallway. No goodnight kisses. We used to curl up together on the couch, tangled in blankets, sharing ice cream from the tub. Now we sat on opposite ends. I'd offer a bite and she'd wave it away. At first, I blamed it on routine. On getting older. On the exhaustion of modern life. I told myself, this happens to everyone eventually. Just a phase. But it wasn't a phase. I remember one night, maybe 6 weeks ago, when she asked me if I'd gone to the doctor lately. I laughed and told her I was fine, just tired. She pressed. Asked if I'd been feeling fatigued. If my appetite had changed. Said I should get checked. It felt off, like she was trying to plant something. Now I wonder if she was hoping to frame the distance as my fault. Maybe she needed a reason to explain the growing emotional gap, something medical, something sympathetic. She wanted a cover story. And I almost gave her one. I started making a list that evening, not on paper, but in my head. Moments, hints, questions I never asked. I went back as far as I could remember, piecing things together like a puzzle I didn't know I'd been building. The week she started working out again, was that really for her health, or was she trying to impress someone? The expensive perfume that showed up in the bathroom cabinet, she said it was a gift from her boss. I never saw a gift bag. Never saw a note. There was a dinner where she forgot her phone on the kitchen counter. It buzzed while she was in the shower. I saw the name, R, no last name. Just R. The message preview read, "Last night was." The screen dimmed before I could read the rest. I should have asked. I should have done something. But I told myself I trusted her. I told myself I was being ridiculous. How many people lie to themselves to keep the peace? How many people stare their gut feeling in the face and say, "No, not me. Not us?" That night, I watched her sleep. Her back to me, shoulders curled inward. She used to sleep with her hand on my chest, her leg over mine. Now she clung to her side of the bed like the space between us was intentional. I wondered how long she'd been gone from me, really gone. Not physically, but emotionally. How long she'd been living a double life right under my nose. The thing about betrayal is it doesn't hit all at once. It trickles in, memory by memory, whispering that what you thought was solid was always crumbling. I didn't have proof yet. No names. No faces. But I didn't need them. I was already living with a ghost. Sometimes the truth doesn't whisper. It shouts. And it did so loudly with a single, accidental email. I was in my home office one morning, organizing receipts and invoices for the accountant when a new email pinged in. It was from a rental service Sarah and I had used once, years ago, when we took a trip to Flagstaff. The subject line read, "Thank you for your reservation," followed by her name. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe an old reservation got reconfirmed. I clicked it out of curiosity. What I saw made my stomach twist. A 4-night booking for a cabin in Sedona. Check-in, 2 weekends ago. Yes, name, Sarah Miller. Billing address, ours. Purpose of stay, corporate strategy offsite. Except that same weekend, Sarah had told me she was in the city, stuck at the office all Saturday, team building with the new hires. She even sent a selfie from what looked like the downtown lobby. And now here it was clear, digital evidence that she'd been somewhere else entirely. The pictures in the listing didn't help. Cozy, rustic cabin. King-size bed. Hot tub. Panoramic windows. This wasn't some minimalist space for slide decks and PowerPoints. It was a place you went to feel away from everything, to escape. To hide. I stared at the screen, not breathing, reading the dates over and over again like maybe, just maybe, I could make the words mean something else. But they didn't change. The longer I sat there, the colder I felt. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, not sure what to do next. Then I remembered something. 2 months ago, Sarah had mentioned a mentorship retreat she'd been nominated for. Her dad's old associate, Daniel Hayes, was organizing it, said he was bringing together a handful of young professionals to develop leadership LLS in an informal setting. I barely registered the name at the time. I knew Daniel well, knew of him. He was one of those guys who floated in and out of Sarah's world. Wealthy, polished, always made me feel like a guest in my own house when he visited. He had the kind of handshake that squeezed just long enough to remind you who was in control. My stomach churned. I opened Sarah's calendar. She always left it synced on the kitchen iPad. Her entry for the weekend in question read simply, "Office Offsite Training." No location. No times. It was a cover. I needed to know more. But I wasn't going to ask her. Not yet. The next day, while Sarah was at her so-called strategy session, I packed a bag and drove. 5 hours of nothing but asphalt, cacti, and the kind of silence that only comes when you're preparing yourself for your worst fear. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't even fully admit it to myself. Part of me still hoped I'd arrive and find it empty. Maybe I'd knock and some retired couple would answer the door, confused but kind. Maybe there'd be some stupid, benign explanation. But the universe doesn't hand out comfort when you're chasing the truth. It gives you clarity and then leaves you to deal with it. When I reached the cabin, I didn't park out front. I found a spot a few hundred feet down the gravel road, shielded by trees. It was dusk. Just enough light to see without being seen. The cabin was exactly like the pictures. Secluded. Silent. Too quiet. I crept up along the side path, half hoping to hear nothing. But then the front door opened. There she was, Sarah, wearing a robe, her hair up in a towel, wine glass in hand. She stepped onto the porch with a laugh, light, relaxed, familiar. Except the voice that responded wasn't mine. It was Daniel's. He followed her out, barefoot, wearing what looked like a white button-down, unbuttoned. He stood behind her, close. Their shoulders touched. She handed him the glass, and he took it like they'd done this 100 times before. I ducked behind a tree, heart pounding. I didn't want to see more, but I had to. He said something. She laughed again. He leaned down and kissed her shoulder. That was it. That was all I needed. No denials. No excuses. No blurry phone footage or suspicious messages. This was it. In the flesh. In real time. The woman I married. Standing on a porch with another man like they shared a life I was never part of. I snapped a photo. Not for revenge. Not to share. Just so that later, when she looked me in the eyes and said, "It's not what you think," I could hold up the truth. I didn't confront them. I backed away slowly, got in my car, and drove. I ended up in a motel an hour outside Sedona. One of those roadside places with flickering lights and bedspreads that smell like old air conditioning. I collapsed onto the mattress fully clothed, phone still in hand, mind reeling. That's when the calm hit me. Not peace. Not numbness. Just clarity. The man I had been, the husband, the partner, the one who trusted, believed, hoped, he died on that gravel road. What remained was someone new. Someone patient. Quiet. Focused. This wasn't about confronting her anymore. It was about what came next. I didn't go home right away. After I left that motel, I checked into another. This one off a quiet side road near Flagstaff. I needed space. Not just from Sarah, but from the version of me that existed 2 days ago. That man would have driven back home and demanded answers, shouted, maybe even begged. But that man was gone. What I felt wasn't rage. It was resolve. Cold. Steady. Intentional. I stared out the motel window for what felt like hours that morning, watching cars drift by in silence. The trees swayed, and the sun slowly dragged itself up over the mountains like it didn't want to be part of this day either. I picked up my phone and made the first call. "Mr. Miller," the voice said. "You've reached Owen's Investigations. How can we help?" I told them everything. Not all the emotions, just the facts. I gave dates, names, locations, and a copy of the email from the cabin rental. The man on the other end, Jeremy, asked if I wanted surveillance. "Yes," I said. "I want everything. Phone records, location logs, financial trails, and if you can, find out how long Daniel Hayes has been part of this." Jeremy didn't sound shocked. That was comforting, in a strange way. "We'll handle it," he said, quietly, and just like that, the first stone fell in what would become a long and deliberate avalanche. That evening, I returned home. Sarah was already in the kitchen, barefoot, sipping tea, scrolling on her phone like the world hadn't shifted beneath her feet. She looked up, startled, clearly not expecting me. "Hey," she said, voice warm. "You're home. I thought you had another stop before coming back." "I was closer than I thought," I replied, setting down my bag. She crossed the room and kissed my cheek. Soft, familiar, practiced. Her hands lingered on my shoulder, and I felt the lie in her fingertips. "I missed you," she said, eyes searching mine. I didn't respond, just smiled slightly. Not warm, not cold, just enough to move the moment along. That night, I lay beside her in silence. Her breathing slowed within minutes, drifting off into whatever dreams she told herself. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the weight of my own heartbeat and thinking about how many years I'd given to a woman who now shared secrets with another man. The next few days moved slowly, deliberately. I didn't mention the cabin. I didn't ask questions. Instead, I did the one thing Sarah never expected me to do. I played along. I brought home coffee, made jokes at dinner, even planned a weekend trip just for us, which she claimed sounded amazing, but then conveniently needed to reschedule due to work. Of course, what she didn't know was that every moment I spent pretending to be normal, I was building a case. I hired a second investigator, this one with contacts in telecom. Within 3 days, I had access to her phone records, calls, messages, and GPS logs. Her phone had pinged towers near the cabin for all 4 nights she said she was burning the midnight oil at work. Her texts to Daniel were short but frequent. Most ended with initials, some with emojis. The most telling exchange? Sarah, need to disappear again soon. I miss that space. Daniel, let's plan another offsite. You bring the coffee. I'll bring everything else. It wasn't love. It was coordination. Routine. This wasn't a mistake, it was a system. I forwarded everything to my lawyer. Nathaniel Ward. Divorce and corporate litigation expert. Harvard grad. Known for being methodical, unflinching, and completely uninterested in emotional drama. He didn't ask me if I was okay. He asked if I wanted to proceed. I want to proceed, I said. Quietly. But thoroughly. That meant asset tracing, will restructuring, and freezing shared accounts. We began gathering everything tied to my name, alone and with her. Most of our property was technically in my name, a fact I'd never really thought about before. Now it felt like armor. But I didn't stop there. Sarah wasn't just my wife. She was the public face of her father's nonprofit foundation, a well-funded entity backed by private donors, grants, and public goodwill. She served as spokesperson, managing director, and brand steward. And from what I was starting to see, she had blurred the lines between her personal life and professional one in more ways than one. Her trips with Daniel? Billed as executive retreats. His name showed up on payment receipts covered by corporate cards. I compiled the documentation and sent it to their finance director anonymously. That same week, I contacted 3 key board members, people I'd met at dinners and charity galas. I told them, carefully and without flourish, that they might want to double-check a few recent transactions. I didn't accuse. I just asked questions. Let the numbers speak. It didn't take long. Whispers started within days. Internal audits. Emergency meetings. One board member emailed me back directly, "Thank you for the heads up. We were suspicious but needed something concrete." Sarah had no idea any of this was happening. At home, she was planning a vacation. Somewhere coastal, she said. Maybe Belize. I nodded, told her it sounded perfect. She'd sit at the table with her laptop, scrolling Airbnb listings, sipping from a wine glass like nothing was unraveling. Sometimes she looked so happy, so normal, I almost forgot what she'd done. Almost. But then her phone would light up and she'd turn its screen down again. Or she'd excuse herself for a Zoom call at 10:45 p.m. And the cracks would show again. A week later, the call came in from my investigator. We've confirmed travel history, cabin stays, and security footage at 2 separate hotels. One of them in San Diego last fall. She claimed to be attending a Women in Leadership forum. I remembered that weekend clearly. I'd made her favorite dinner. Left flowers on the nightstand for when she got back. She called me from the balcony of her hotel room, said she wished I was there. She wasn't alone in that room. The footage showed Daniel arriving, room key in hand, hours before her scheduled check-in. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I called my lawyer. Send the draft, I said. And get it to her before month's end. Sarah was still humming in the kitchen when I hung up. Still smiling. Still planning. But the world she had built, stone by stone, lie by lie, was already beginning to fracture beneath her. And I was no longer part of it. 2 weeks into the investigation, things started to shift. Sarah still had no idea what was unfolding behind the scenes. To her, we were settling back into a new kind of rhythm, a husband returned from travel, a couple reconnecting through small gestures and polite dinners. But underneath, the foundation had already cracked and I was slowly chipping it away brick by brick. Then, one evening, something unexpected happened. I parked my car in the back corner of the corporate lot near my office. It was late, almost 9 p.m., and I'd stayed behind to finish going through final drafts for an investor report. The lot was mostly empty, lit only by a few aging halogen lights that buzzed when the wind blew. I walked to my car, coffee in one hand, laptop bag in the other. I never heard it coming. Just a blur of motion, metal on metal, a black SUV that clipped the side of my car and skidded away before I could even react. The impact sent me stumbling back into the trunk, my coffee splattering down my jacket. The vehicle didn't stop. No screech of brakes. No apology. Just a hit and vanish. I stood there, heart racing, processing what had just happened. At first, I thought it was random, maybe a reckless driver. Maybe someone texting. But the more I looked at the way it happened, the speed, the angle, the less it looked like an accident. And then it hit me, this wasn't random. I called the police, filed a report, and waited for the tow truck. Nothing serious had happened, thankfully, just a dented rear fender and a shattered taillight. No injuries. But the timing couldn't be ignored. That night, back at home, I didn't mention the incident to Sarah. She was curled up on the couch watching some romantic comedy wrapped in a blanket she used to keep in my office. She asked if I wanted to join her. I said I had work to do. Instead, I went to my study and made another call, this one to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Lieutenant Colby, a voice answered. It's been a long time, Gavin. Too long, I said. I need a favor. Colby and I had served together overseas. He had since moved into federal intelligence consulting. I knew if anyone could help me dig deeper, quietly, and efficiently, it was him. I explained the situation, the car incident, the ongoing surveillance on Sarah, and the slow unraveling of something that now felt far bigger than just infidelity. I mentioned Daniel Hayes' name. Colby didn't say anything for a moment. Then Hayes has a history. Real estate, logistics, tech consulting, but a lot of offshore ties. The kind of connections that don't show up in background checks. Can you look into it? I asked. I already am. Over the next few days, Colby sent updates. Hayes had known affiliations with a private equity group that had been under quiet federal scrutiny for suspicious transactions. One of his known associates, a man named Reggie Falk, had a sealed record and ties to security consulting. The same Reggie who had been seen dining with Sarah and Daniel last summer. I remembered because Sarah came home late and had mentioned meeting some of Daniel's business friends. Colby confirmed my growing suspicion this wasn't just a love affair. Sarah had become entangled in something deeper. She might not have known the full extent of Daniel's connections, but she was orbiting a sphere of influence built on manipulation and power. And someone, maybe Daniel, maybe one of his people, had seen me as a threat. The car incident wasn't meant to hurt me. It was a message. I upgraded my home security. Installed dash cams in both of our cars, hers secretly, mine openly. I also added motion sensors around the perimeter of our property and signed up for a monitoring service that alerted me of movement within 5 feet of any entry point. I even carried a GPS tracker now just in case. Sarah noticed. Are you feeling okay? She asked one evening as I installed a second camera facing the back gate. Just being cautious, I said. Since when? She laughed. You used to forget to lock the door. I shrugged. The world's getting weirder. She gave a small, distant smile. Yeah, I guess it is. I also had my legal team fast-track everything. By now, the divorce petition was ready. Grounds: marital misconduct, misappropriation of marital funds, and irreconcilable differences. I had proof of every hotel, every cabin, every false invoice she signed under the foundation's name. But I didn't serve it yet. Instead, I released the documents into a secure vault accessible only through 2 digital keys, mine and my attorney's. The backup plan. Just in case someone tried to make this go away. Just in case someone tried to silence me. The strange thing was, despite all of it, the betrayal, the manipulation, the veiled threats, I felt calm. More than calm. I felt prepared. Because for the first time since this started, I wasn't reacting. I was driving. Sarah, meanwhile, continued her performance. She talked about having children again. Said she was thinking of pulling back from work to spend more time at home. She even suggested a marriage retreat in the spring. Some couples counseling, she said one morning, pouring me coffee. Could be good for us. I stared at her, trying to decipher whether she was being ironic or if she actually believed we could still be saved. Maybe she had convinced herself the lies could be wrapped in enough comfort to become truth again. Or maybe she thought I was still that clueless man who once believed her excuses about dusty sheets and late meetings. But I wasn't that man anymore. I was something sharper now. More deliberate. That week, I began preparing the public phase of the operation. A quiet leak to a financial blogger about the questionable transactions inside the Hayes Foundation. A conversation with a journalist I once worked with during a tech expo. An anonymous tip to the Better Business Bureau. All roads led to the same place, exposure. Hayes had power, yes, but he also had arrogance. And people like that always assumed they were untouchable until the spotlight turned toward them. I still hadn't confronted Sarah. I didn't need to. Every move I made was aimed not at retribution but prevention. I wasn't going to let her or anyone bury this with half-truths or pity tears. I wasn't going to lose anything else. The day I filed the first batch of legal motions, I received a text from Colby. Confirmed, Reggie was near your building the night of the accident. We're watching now. Stay alert. You've rattled something. I locked my phone, sat back in my chair, closed my eyes, and waited for the tremor to ripple outward.